Hey YouTube, what's going on? This is Gino Benino. I'm just going to make a quick video outside. Beautiful day, so I felt might as well take advantage of it. This is in response to BATAVENGER's 500 subscription contest. First thing I want to say is BATAVENGER is an excellent, I always enjoy his content. He has, not only does he show modern books, books that he just bought, but he goes and gets some specs and gives some opinions on things that not everybody, things that aren't completely initially obvious, reasons that a book is a good spec book and stuff like that. He'll go into somebody's costume or somebody's relationship to somebody else and things like that. And those are the kind of cool videos I like. Again, not the super obvious ones, but the one that somebody with a lot of knowledge can kind of piece together. So once again, BATAVENGER, enjoy your content, and you got a great contest going on too. You got some good books showing. Anyway, once again, I'm outside, so it might not be the most light, perfect situation, but I hope certainly you can see what's going on. As far as the contest goes, he wanted us to do three things. First of all, he had 3 bullet points. He wanted to make sure we were 18. I certainly am. Next thing he wanted to is talk about the character we most identify with. And in my case, it would be my favorite character, period, which is Spider-Man. Reason being, he's a bit of a smartass. Let's be honest here, when he is in his civilian clothes, he's actually fairly mild-mannered dude, but when he puts on the Spider-Man outfit, he kind of lets loose, and when he gets into a fight, he starts running his mouth. And I always, again, I mean, I hate to say it, but in my day, back in high school, stuff like that, I think I was a bit of a smartass, probably too much so. I've learned a little bit more, again, grown up a little bit more, but I used to be a bit of a smartass. So anyway, that's it. That's why I relate to him. The other thing he wanted us to do is to talk about some stories that our favorite storyline, and I'm actually going to do 2, but I'll make it quick. The first one is the book you're looking at, which is Hulk 182. Now, first of all, this book is in rough shape. This is my original copy from when I was just a youngster. But I remember this book. I don't know if you've read this, but if not, you should. Since back then, and this was when the Hulk was no doubt he was the strongest guy in the Marvel universe. If he wasn't stronger, he would get ticked off. When he got ticked off, he got stronger. And anyway, but he had the mind of best way to explain it, he had the mind of a child. He was, he didn't have much vocabulary, he didn't have much understanding of how the world worked and all that. So in this particular issue, he met basically a homeless guy, a panhandler, and they became friends, shared some food and things like that, and got to be good friends. To make a long story short, the panhandler taught, I think his name was Cracker Jack Jackson, if my memory serves me right. He taught the Hulk how to write his name, how to spell. And the story reminded me a lot of the original Frankenstein. If you've seen the old black and white Frankenstein, where the Frankenstein monster makes friends with the blind guy, and the blind guy doesn't really know he's a monster, just thinks he's a regular guy, and they let loose, they drink, they get drunk, they smoke some cigars and stuff like that. And then of course it doesn't have a happy ending, but nonetheless, this kind of has this follows that same storyline. Make a long story short, these guys break out of prison, and these guys, Hammer and Anvil have this magic band between them that's kind of electrified and very powerful, and makes them much stronger dudes. And they get to fight in the Hulk, and it accidentally touches Cracker Jack, and it kills him. And it was, kind of devastating. I felt sorry for the Hulk, because Hulk didn't have many friends at this time in his comic books, and this was one of them. And it really, Hulk ended up burying him and putting a tombstone on his grave, and did the thing get spelled because he now knew how to spell, and spelled some, did some stuff in his tombstone. And again, I'm not a crier, but this issue I cried. I felt I was very emotionally involved in this issue, and I still remember it today, just to show you what an effect it had on me. The other one I've talked about before, and it's Spider-Man 121, 122. In essence, Spider-Man had a girlfriend, Gwen Stacy, pictured right there, and Goblin found out who Spider-Man was and knew where to hit him. Comes and took, and he was basically losing his mind for the one of 3,000 times, and came and took Gwen Stacy, dropped her off a bridge, and I think even that was alluded to in the last issue, 798. But anyway, drops her off a bridge, and Spider-Man tries saving her, and in the process snapped her neck. And again, this was devastated. This was something that, the first time that a major character ever died in a comic book, and I remember it. Then, of course, Spider-Man goes to get revenge, and that happens in this issue, where the Green Goblin doesn't really care that he killed his girlfriend. All he wants is revenge, and because of his son being all messed up with drugs, and they have it out, and he was going to kill Spider-Man with his youth. If you saw the first movie, you know what happens. He basically was going to kill Spider-Man with his jet flyer, and Spider-Man got out of the way, and it ended up impaling and killing the Green Goblin, Norman Osborn. And again, this was one of those stories that emotionally, I gotta be honest, I cried during this one too. But this solidified me as a comic book freak. It made me kind of have an emotional attachment to the characters even deeper, and from that point on, I was a lifelong Spider-Man fan. Which is going to get me into the third thing that Bat wanted us to do, which is talk about spec books. And the first one I'm going to show is this one, which is a DC book. And the reason that I feel this is a spec book, and the reason that I like it, is because it brings Batman and Catwoman to it brings them down to an emotional level. There's not a lot of punching, there's not a lot of killing and stuff like that. There's no Joker or anything like that. It just basically brings the heroes to a human level. And I think that's something that Marvel used to do back in when I first started reading Marvel back in the 70s. Everybody had real life problems. The Fantastic Four, the Thing, he knew he was ugly, and he knew that he had a girlfriend that was blind, but he always felt self-conscious because he was ugly around her, and she really didn't care because she loved him anyway. And Johnny Storm, he was always kind of getting into trouble and stuff like that, and teasing the Thing, or teasing Ben. And then there was the Yancey Street gang that used to basically troll the Thing and stuff like that. So again, it was the human connection that you made with the characters that actually made you more involved when they got into a fight, that you wanted them to always win, and to do good in the situation, and not to get beat up too bad. And I think that, again, that's something that I think DC is doing with this book. I think it brings you down to a human level. I know some people complain about it. Some people like more punching and fighting and stuff like that. But for me, what doing something like this does is it expands your fan base. It gets more females, girls, women, what have you, involved. And I think that expands the fan base, and that's what this hobby needs. This needs more people. And again, I know sometimes Marvel overdoes it with the diversity thing and all that, but I do think, again, kind of slowing things down and getting you emotionally involved in the characters. I think that because when you get emotionally involved in a character, you turn into a long-term fan. I think that's kind of what happens with Game of Thrones. I think that's what happens with Walking Dead to a certain point. You know, when you were emotionally involved, you actually cared if the characters live or died, or if they got hurt or not, and that's kind of what happens in this issue. So that's my 2 cents on that. The other one is Thanos storyline. The reason that I like this as a I think it's a good spec book is I think that it caught a lot of people off guard. I don't think they were expecting this to go in the direction it did. I think they just thought it was going to be basic, you know, comic book stuff. And then when they started taking liberties with the characters that they did, as far as the Cosmic Ghost Rider and Silver Surfer and stuff like that, they basically took them and ran with them in a completely different direction. It kind of reminded me a little bit of like the Ultimate universe, where he could do things with the characters that the characters were still there, but he just did things and took liberties with them that wouldn't be done in, say, a normal, you know, continuity. And I really liked that. I thought that, so you always knew you could be up for a surprise in any given issue. You didn't know what was going to happen on the next page. Was somebody going to die? Was somebody going to get smashed? Was somebody going to get, you know, dismembered or whatever? It was just constant guessing game. So I think that the reason this is a good spec book is because there's a lot of different directions you can go with Cosmic Ghost Rider and stuff like that. And I also think that that this was a smaller, is in the lines of most books, a smaller print run, and I think that this will be a good spec on down the road. Another one is this is kind of a sleeper, not necessarily a sleeper, but this is a good spec book. If people don't have it in their collection, I think you maybe should go get it. This is Venom Inc. Alpha, not the second book, but the first one. And the reason that this is kind of a sleeper book is there's a lot went on in here. There was a lot of happenings that I think are going to affect a lot of things in regards to Venom on down the line. So for that reason, and also this was an expensive book. This was a $5 book, and for that reason, I think a lot of people just said, well, I'll get maybe a different version, wait till it gets cheaper, stuff like that. And for that reason, I think there's a lot of them still on the shelves. But my suggestion to anybody would be to pick this book up, get a couple copies, and you'll see, I have a feeling that, again, as things progress in the Venom verse, if you will, with the movies, maybe the second movie and stuff like that, there's a lot of potential for this book. So I wouldn't, go spending the kids' shoe money, but I think I would pick myself up a couple copies now that you still can get them in cover price. What happens with this sort of book is it sits there, nothing happens, and all of a sudden somebody says something that's going to happen in a movie, and it goes bananas, and then you can't find any, and they're all of a sudden $20 on eBay. So my recommendation, get a couple copies, one that you read, or one that you keep somewhere, and one that you can kind of spec on. That's kind of, my game plan. And then the last one, and I know BATAVENGER hates this book, but I got to show it anyway, Spider-Man 798. And again, the reason being, and this is my philosophy with this, now I may be wrong, but here's how I feel. I think that if you look at the graded versions of this, and some of them are starting to make their way to eBay, in the liner notes, they list it as Norman Osborn as the first Red Goblin. So what that tells me is Red Goblin, I think, and Norman are going to split at some point. Carnage is going to go his way, and the Green Goblin's going to go his way. And I think that that Carnage is so going to be taken with the power and stuff like that that he got, being part of the Goblin, having the glider, having the pumpkins, all that I think he's going to maybe hook up with either Hobgoblin, Ned Leeds, or there's a lot of possibilities. So once again, I would keep an eye on him as not necessarily the Norman Osborn Red Goblin, but I think that he'll have an opportunity to split off and kind of do his own thing. And also, this is a major character in the Spider-Man, story arc. And I think that it's not going to explode. There's too many of them. But I think that down the line, this is one of those long-term hold kind of things, similar to Spider-Man 361, and I speak out of experience for that. I bought a bunch of those, thinking that they were going to, go crazy, and they didn't, and they didn't, and they didn't, and they didn't, and then they did. And that's kind of what's happening right now. I had 46 copies of that just kind of by accident. And it was just sitting there. I couldn't give it away. And then all of a sudden, with the movie announcement and all that kind of stuff, now it's going absolutely crazy. So just a lesson for you. If you have this in your box, don't get disappointed if it's not worth $25 tomorrow. But hang on to it. If you've got to give it to your, give your collection to your kid or something like that, give your collection to your kid. Tell them to hang on to it and wait and see what happens. I have a feeling this book will be a good long-term hold just for that reason. And that's it. So once again, congratulations to BATAVENGER. Keep up the good work, and you've got a great contest. You really have some good prizes and stuff like that. Once again, this is Gino Bonino, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.